Howdy.
Howdy.
My name is Mohammed Ahmed. My major is electrical engineering. I'm class of 2018. I'm from Squadron 21. Our honorable speakers for tonight are Mr. Michael Martin and Lieutenant Colonel Nadeem Islam. Let me introduce Mr. Mike first. Mike is a native Texan who has served 23 years in the U.S. Air Force in special munitions and engineering field. During his time in service, he was selected for a scholarship program and obtained his BS in mechanical engineering at Texas A&M, his class of 1992. He worked in the private sector and returned to A&M for his doctorate degree in environmental engineering and began a secondary research in religious studies. He was promoted to the position of Director in Engineering and Environmental Sustainability and recently retired from Texas A&M in March 2015. He currently serves as the Community Outreach Representative and member of the Executive Committee for Islamic Community of San Antonio. Colonel Nadeem Islam is an Army doctor veteran and class of 1997 with a Bachelor of Science in Biochemistry. He was the first Muslim chaplain to join the Corps of Cadets at Texas A&M and was also part of the Student Senate. He is currently a Lieutenant Colonel in U.S. Army Reserves. He serves as an officer in charge of clinics servicing 10,000 troops. He also participated in the Operation Iraqi Freedom, serving 2 tours of greater than 6 months in Iraq, Baghdad, and also in Kuwait. I'd like to begin by asking a set of preliminary questions to our honorable speakers. So what made you join the armed forces? And as a participating Muslim looking back at those decisions, do you have any regrets?
Thank you for the nice introduction.
What got me to join the United States military was I actually grew up right here on campus. My dad was a grad student when I first came, and I grew up across the street in the Mary Student Housing. And as I was growing up, I would watch the A&M Corps Cadets go by, and I wanted to be part of this great tradition and honor. And so as I looked to join the Corps Cadets and serve to the Corps Cadets, the next natural extension was to join the military. A lot of the advisors and leaders and role models and mentors were from the U.S. military. I enjoyed the camaraderie, I enjoyed the friendships. I also liked the disciplined lifestyle. And so it was a natural extension. It was also, to me, and people would always be like, why do you want to give up these choices you can deploy? I really felt that it was a great opportunity to kind of be able to serve to the country that had given me so much, and definitely the educational and leadership opportunities were greatly beneficial to my growth.
Actually, in the introduction, I was class of 85 and for my undergraduate. And I had actually been on active duty for almost 10 years when I came back on scholarship at Texas A&M. But what caused me to join the military, because we're going to be all truthful here, is that I was actually going to the seminary after I left high school, and I left the seminary in San Antonio and was looking for something, and I didn't want to go. I didn't feel I was mature enough to go back to college. Okay, and so the choices were limited, and Vietnam was still going on at the time. Okay, and so that way I thought, well, I had a lot of friends who were already in the military, and I decided at that time that was probably something that I wanted to do as well. And so rather than wait for my number to come up, I went ahead and volunteered for the United States Air Force.
How has serving your country impacted your faith?
My story is a little bit different than Brother Nadeem in that he served and he's Muslim, and he served on active duty while he was Muslim. For me, I became Muslim years after I was left the military, and I connect with what Brother Nadeem said because the military taught me, it focused me, and taught me discipline and gave me something to look forward to, a direction. Gave me a direction to look forward to. And whether it was in the life of this world or the life of the hereafter, I think we need that direction and that focus. Because it's easy to get caught up in a lot of things and get sidetracked. And I think that the time that I spent in the military gave me that discipline. And for the Muslims that are here, sometimes they'll know that it's not easy to get up on a winter morning and pray Fajr, right? When it's cold and the bed is warm. It takes discipline, right, to do those kinds of things. And so I credit the military with giving me that discipline and that focus. And it's carried over, hopefully, into the way I practice my faith.
So the opportunities that the Army gave actually made me much more focused on my own religion. So when I joined the Corps Cadets, I noticed there was a vacuum. There's many Muslim cadets, not many, probably about 10 or so, but there was no organized way for us to be together. So I was actually became the first Muslim chaplain. This was back in 1996. And at that time, that really propelled me to read more as I had to give weekly discussions. We would have gatherings in which we would talk about religious topics. And then now on my Corps Cadet uniform, I had the crescent on there. And so then I had to really live up to it. And I had to live up to my faith more so as it became kind of a visible sign of being a chaplain. So that definitely helped me as a young student trying to be a role model. Then when I moved on to the Army, I joined, as soon as I finished my schooling, which was I finished medical school, then I did residency in emergency medicine. Then I moved on and my first assignment was, you're going to go to Fort Hood, you're going to leave your stuff there, and then you're going to deploy to Iraq. So this is back in 2003. So within months of finishing my training, I knew I was heading out to Iraq. When I showed up at my first base, which was in Balad, there was some Muslims there. We wanted to kind of organize ourselves so that we could at least use our faith as a way to deal with the stresses of life and things of that nature. So we started organizing a Friday Jummah prayer. And there's a special designation in the military, which is an Army lady. If there's not like a trained chaplain, then they allow those faiths to have Army lady. So I went through the paperwork, became an Army lady as an additional duty to being the emergency physician on base. And so that also again propelled me to really look at my faith and to read about it and to explain it to people who had questions. I mean, they would even ask me, when people passed away, what to do in their last rites and ceremonies, and kind of became a liaison to try to get information to the command about Muslims. I think that more than that, what the military has done is it's given me a lot of discipline. I think that some of the cornerstones of being able to practice the Islamic faith is the factor of discipline. To be able to stay away from temptations, to be able to pray your prayers 5 times a day. As somebody who's been living in this now military lifestyle for close to 25 years, you get used to the discipline. I mean, you said this is no big deal. I can wake up at the crack of dawn. I've done it, for large periods of my life. So I credit a lot of the military discipline and teamwork and things that I've learned, which also really easily translates into religion and vice versa. I would say that it helped me become a good officer, helped me be a good cadet. Some of the teachings and discipline that the religion of Islam teaches me. So I found it to be a good, the skill sets are very interusable. Thank you.
Sir, did you serve as a chaplain in the U.S. Army?
So the chaplain is an MLS in itself. So you've got to be you can't be if you're going to be a chaplain, that's all you're allowed. So my MLS was 62 Alpha, which was emergency physician, and 61 November, which is a flight surgeon. So that's what I served as in the Army. But in the absence of having an Army chaplain wherever I'm at, I would always become an Army lady, which gives me a lot of the rights to be able, like a chaplain. So I had a little bit of a budget. I had rights to the chapel. I could reserve it. I could send out notices throughout the base to get organized, things of that nature. So, I served some of the functions of a chaplain, and I've been on bases where there's a chaplain. It's really nice because they can do this as a full-time job, and they have chaplain's assistants, which are enlisted soldiers, which help the chaplain. So definitely there's a lot of benefits to the chaplain, but they're limited in number. I'm not sure about the exact number, but if I had to guess, it's probably somewhere between 10 and 15 in the U.S. Army. And there's not even one for every base. So there's a lot of necessity for lay leaders to kind of step in those vacuums.
Did you face any skepticism or hate or any comments like those in the armed forces based on your religion beliefs?
So my experience now, almost 18 years in the U.S. military and Corps cadets as well. In general, once you put on the uniform, they don't look at you as a different faith or a different color or a different ethnicity. They look at you as somebody, a brother in arms, somebody who's willing to make the similar sacrifices. So I would say that 99.9% of my interactions, even though this country's been through some very trying times, I obviously joined before the events of September 11th, and then we had the Army psychiatrist in Fort Hood. We've had many different incidents, or at least very high-level incidents that would have stressed the relationship between me and the people that I serve with. But every time I've come, people have been very supportive. That we know that this is not the norm. No one's ever questioned me. Every time you're deploying, of course, I'm fully armed. I'm in the same barracks. And nobody's ever looked at me that I could tell with skepticism or anything of that nature. So I would say the Army is always kind of ahead of society from the integration of African Americans to the integration of different minorities and ethnicities. They've always been ahead of the society in opening their arms and becoming one cohesive unit. I mean, at the end of the day, we always relied on each other, and I was their doctor. And so they knew that if something happened to them, if the IED blew up, I was going to be the one that was going to be there to take care of it. So there was an inherent amount of trust that we had between each other. With that being said, they may have been some small incidences in which I would be in the dining hall and I would overhear comments, things of that nature, that would be troubling to me. But in most of those times, they were talking generalities, maybe something they'd heard from the news or talk show host, and kind of spin off of that. But rarely would it apply to an individual or me as a person. I found the best way to kind of deal with this was to just be a good example and not to confront those comments directly. I find that one of the main reasons for these kind of is that people just don't know Muslims. If you look at the studies, majority of Americans don't know a single Muslim. Despite the fact that 1/5 of the world population, about 2% of the American population, the majority of I guarantee these students at A&M have never really interacted with a Muslim student. And part of that's the fact that the Muslims need to do more outreach, and part of it's the fact that we need to also look around. So in this, because of this, I think one of the great tools in this is just to get to know each other. I think that's one of the best ways to break down these barriers. And I found that to be one of the most effective ways in the United States military, is for people to get to know you. I never hid my faith. I always prayed when it was time for prayer. I always kept my devotion. But I never used religion as an excuse to get out of work either. So that's also a very important distinction. As a Muslim chaplain, lay leader, there's always a subset of soldiers who want to use religion to get out of work. And I would never want to be one of those soldiers. Yes, I need to go pray and go for Friday prayer, but that doesn't mean that I need to get half the day off. Yes, I need an hour to go pray, and I'll be right back, and I may show up early to do my work to make up for that hour I'm gone. So I think that people saw that work ethic, and they never saw that I was using religion as a way to get out of work. And I think that goes a long way. People can see the genuineness in you, and the fact that you just want to practice your religion like they want to practice theirs, that you're here to carry the load on everyone else. This was very relevant during Ramadan. We have 2 different deployments. I spent Ramadan on deployment. You know, sometimes we had to take PT tests, sometimes we had to carry heavy loads, sometimes we had to do things out in the hot sun. You know, we did it. And we never said, you know, I'm fasting, please give me a break, you know. Sometimes they would say, why don't you take a break, you want me to do this. But I never said that on my own. And I think that's really important for them to see that. So, in conclusion, I would say that really it's high time for Muslims to get much more engaged, and programs like this is important. And I've kind of been following the MSA here on Facebook and see that y'all are starting to volunteer with the boys club and the girls club. And things like that. These are all very important functions that y'all are doing, and encourage y'all to continue doing this kind of things.
Yeah, for me again, you know, when I was active duty, I wasn't practicing Muslim. I wasn't Muslim. I think what I was practicing the religion lead. Okay, so I think that's what young people do, and that's what I did when I first came in the military as well. But I agree with what Brother Nadeem said about getting to learn about Muslims and to know them as individuals. You know, I found out in talking to people, a lot of people don't really know the background, and they don't really understand. Of course, life is hectic. There's a lot of hustle bustle in life. And so, in all honesty, people very seldom take time to know their own religion, much less the religion of somebody else. Okay? And I often make the comment, and we know it's true, there are Christmas Christians, but there are also Ramadan Muslims. Okay? There are Sunday Christians, and there's also Friday Muslims. Okay? So the world is made up of those people, but you have to really understand what practicing Christians believe in, what practicing Muslims believe in, and we have to get to know one another, and that's one of the things that led me to study faith, is that even though we don't believe what the other believes, we have to respect one another, because we're in it together. We're in it together. So.
Today we often hear that Muslims cannot be trusted. As someone who has put their life on the line for the country, how does that make you feel, sir?
You know, again, I still have to go back to the fact that I wasn't Muslim, and I was fortunate enough to serve a brief time in Desert Storm as well. So I think what maybe that imprinted on me, because I had never been that far away from home before. I'd certainly been in Europe, I had certainly been in Asia, but I'd never been to the Middle East. And all of these things left an imprint on me. Because as a young man growing up in Texas, before I joined the military, I never left Texas was my world. And for a lot of people, that's just the way it is. And there's a lot of other cultures and people out there, and we need to get to know those people. And the world is getting smaller every day. The world is getting smaller every day. And, you know, putting my life on the line, I think when you're in the military, you don't have time to think about those things. You know, I remember, you know, coming close to getting sucked into a jet engine intake one time. And if it wasn't for the master sergeant who was keeping an eye on me, you know, I might have been sucked in, you know. So that could have been the end of it. But you don't think about those things because you're busy doing your job all the time. I'll just relate. What was a little bit upsetting, because I know the service that I provided my country. And being a regular officer and having an active duty service commitment, if I was ever, it's over now, but if I would have been called back to serve, even if after I had become Muslim and accepted Islam, this is my country. And my oath was, right, to support and defend, right? And that's still here. Just like the young men and the young women who are in the Corps, and it's drilled into them. It was drilled into me too. And so it's about justice. It's about justice. And I felt that while I was in the military, I was upholding justice. And whether I'm Muslim or Christian or Jew or Hindu or whatever, justice is the overriding thing.
So we often hear that Muslims cannot be trusted these days. Putting your life on the line, how do you feel about that?
Often the people who say these are ones that are not actually serving, first of all. And second, it would be belittling of our sacrifices and sacrifices of the families. So I've done 4 overseas deployments. Every time, I would say the biggest sacrifice is actually on the family. I've got a family of 5 kids. My wife is sitting right here. And the first deployment, I think she just found out she was pregnant for a week, and then she knew I was leaving the country for the next 8 months. So, it's these kind of sacrifices that not knowing what the future's going to be, and you're going to leave, and the separation. Those are mainly some of the biggest sacrifices there is. Leaving away precious time as your kids are growing up, or spending time with your family. And then on top of that, you're in harm's way. I mean, thousands of soldiers have been hurt. Many of my colleagues have passed away. I've taken care of thousands of soldiers that have blown up limbs and things of that nature. I work with the main combat support hospital in Baghdad, near Sina, and it's a daily occurrence to have a mass casualty. So it's to belittle these sacrifices of, I would say my sacrifice is small compared to the ones that have whose lives are now in the Arlington Cemetery, and people who are are using prosthetic limbs and things of that nature. They've made great sacrifices, and I would say that the ones that often say these are ones that really haven't made any sort of sacrifice. They're really kind of playing to the masses and trying to rely on people's fears rather than based on actual fact and what's actually happening with this. So, in general, I would be very sad to hear this, but I find that it's also a challenge and a call for us to be more active, for us to be more engaged, so to kind of outdo this negative stereotypes, and to kind of get the message known that we're Americans, we're here to serve, and our interest is in the betterment of this country as everyone else's.
Last question before we take audience questions. So it is a common belief of non-Muslims these days that the values and beliefs of Muslims are against the Constitution of the U.S. What would you like to comment on that?
I would say that, in my opinion, that the values that the United States of America stands for is most in line with the values of Islam in any country in the world at this time. There's no country in which the son of a very poor person could not be the president of America. There's no country in the world where, even my background, where we grew up, in the one-bedroom apartment across the street from Mary Street housing, we can move on, we can, be in the top 1% of earners, as far as being a physician or whatever it may be. There isn't this kind of social mobility, equality, and ability to be able to be fair and just. There isn't any other country in the world that has this. And I think these are very much of Islamic values. The ideas of equality and justice and the pursuit of happiness and giving everyone a fair chance. And it's really based on your effort and your work that determines your altitude. These kind of things is kind of fair playing field and making sure that even the poor kids get a chance at life. I think this country is unbelievable in making sure that there is an opportunity for social mobility. So I would say that the principles of justice, of fairness that this country is built on is very much in line with my Islamic values, and the idea of a democracy in which we choose our own faith, and the idea of the army being an instrument of the people's will is also in line with my Islamic values. So I don't really find, there are of course different national issues that you may or may not agree with, but that's part of the democracies that we've got to, we've got to make. If you don't believe in it, then you've got to engage the political system. You've got to engage the media. You've got to work, and the system is very much open for you to try to convince your neighbors that they're on the wrong course. That, maybe it's not in our best interest to go this way or that way. It's an open system. We've seen how laws have changed and been repealed and rechanged based on the engagement and understanding of how the country works. So, in conclusion, I think that we're very blessed to have an open society, and we just have to understand how change occurs, and we should learn to engage the society as such.
I agree with Brother Nadeem in that I believe that the values that are espoused by Islam go hand in hand with the values of this country, the core values of this country. When we talk about people not knowing Muslims, another thing that is not well known in the West, and again I said I traveled, when I was in the military, is getting to know people from other nations and to see how blessed, truly blessed we are, and the opportunities that we have here, freedom of religion. There are countries that don't have that, and yet they espouse themselves to be Muslim countries that don't allow the same freedoms that we have here. And you would think, because the scripture in Islam preaches those freedoms and those same ideals, that it would be so. Unfortunately, Islam is made up of people. And because of that, they're not always practicing their religion as it was revealed or supposed to be practiced. And we see that that's the case in a lot of the countries today. Again, I go back to my oath of office, and the things that we're talking about and the things that I'm hearing today, I think that if our founding fathers would hear some of the rhetoric that's being spoken, they would turn over in their graves, because they framed the Constitution for just that reason, to have those freedoms, so that they can't be taken away. And the same thing, if you read the scripture, the Quran in Islam, you'll see a lot of those, or the Hadith, the sayings of the Prophet, you'll see a lot of those same freedoms being upheld. And so it's about, first of all, for the Muslims here, knowing your own religion and then practicing it. And then if there's an interest by somebody who's non-Muslim, to also find out. Because that's what's going to help solve some of the problems. And the clear and definite understanding that Islam is made up of people, just as all religions are.
Sir, quick question. I've heard a little about your story, how the Bonfire tragedy in 1999 impacted your life. Would you care to add something to it?
I came to A&M again in 1998, and my office was at Weisenbecker Research Center, and in 1999 my office overlooked where they were building the bonfire. By that time I had already been studying many of the world's religions, not just Islam, but a lot of religions, and had access to the faculty reference library. And so I had the opportunity to do a lot of reading and getting to know, and then also talking to the graduate students. I don't know if you know, but a lot of the graduate students, they just aren't from here, y'all, And so when you talk to them, you need to listen to them and find out what their experiences are, whether they're first generation or their parents or their grandparents. Find out what it's like in their country and learn from them. And I started to do that, and in my office there were 12 graduate students. We had some Christians, we had a couple of atheists. I don't get that one. But we had some Buddhists, and we had one Muslim brother who came in later after I started. And we'd stay up late at night and in the graduate student lab and 2, 3 a.m. talking about all kinds of things. And we started talking about religion. And so the Muslim brother took the opportunity to make dawah to me, to invite me and tell me some things. And alhamdulillah, he was a good brother, because it makes all the difference. Something I want to key on, the best dawah, the best invitation you can make to the religion is to be a good Muslim. If you say something, live up to it. And so it was at that time, after I had studied, I went to the mosque here a couple of times, because everything that I had read and everything that I heard was good. So I don't know if I ever told the brothers this or not, but they didn't. But I had to go to Juma. I had to listen to them, because what I read was good, what the brothers were telling me was good, but I had to make sure they weren't worshiping snakes. I like to make that joke, because it has to all come together. right? And so that I had studied. I had nothing that was standing in my way, and the bonfire accident happened, and a friend of mine who happened to be in the office that night called me and told me the tragedy. He said, "Is there anything that we can do?" And I said, "They already have emergency personnel coming. There's really nothing that we could do. I can't get over there in time. Let the professionals take care of it." And that was the time that 12 young people, they lost their life. And the thing is I always think about it, and for the Muslims, we're told, just because you wake up in the morning doesn't mean you're going to go to bed at night, and because you go to bed at night doesn't mean you're going to wake up in the morning. And this was true for those 12 young people, because they were thinking about next week's exam, they were thinking about they had a date on the weekend, they were thinking about a paper that was due. That's what was on their mind. So they had no way of knowing that was their last day on earth. Were they right with their Lord? Only they know, and their Lord knows. 'Cause nobody else knows, right? Were they right with their Lord? But it made me think that I need to do something. I need to do something. And then so it was that next day that I went to the masjid, and I said, "Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah." And I took my testimony of faith. And so I haven't looked back, and it's been great ever since.
Very inspiring stories there. We'll be taking audience questions now.
So, pertaining to the uniform standard in the military, both pertaining to male and female soldiers, airmen, Marines, sailors, and Coast Guardsmen, should practicing Muslims be allowed to wear the hijab, a beard, or a burqa, or not a burqa, sorry, a turban, or anything of that nature, in your opinion?
In my opinion, there should be a religious accommodation made as long as it doesn't affect the mission. So, for example, we have several sheep members that are wearing a turban. As long as they're in a position where it doesn't affect the mission, I think there should be a religious accommodation being made. We found that making religious accommodation will allow these communities to be much more engaged, will allow them to want to send their sons and daughters to serve this country, because that may be one of the hindrances to the community fully engaging in the society. And I think it's in our best interest as a multicultural nation that we are to make religious accommodation as long as it does not affect the mission.
And I think we spoke a little bit before the program. As far as the beard is concerned for the men, the beard is not mandatory for the men. It's highly recommended, but it's not mandatory. And I know when I was active duty, facial hairs was something that wasn't a good idea, particularly if you have to don a gas mask, right? And you couldn't get a good seal. So it's in your best interest, your own. So
that's where it would affect the mission.
I think it would affect the mission if you couldn't get a good seal on your gas mask because you had a beard. When you were in combat, you probably should shave. I think that would affect the mission.
Wouldn't a turban and a hijab also affect that?
So in this day and age, we have accommodation means looking at all different sorts of technology. So when you're looking at a gas mask, they can be made in ways that can accommodate. There are ways to be able to make it in which you can they may be more expensive, they may not be feasible for everyone, but there are ways to make religious accommodation. I mean, at any given time in the United States Army right now, there's probably 2 to 3% of them have a beard, and some of them it's due to medical reasons. there's a medical condition many African Americans have where they can't shave because all the time because it causes a lot of problems on the face. So I mean, even my unit, I had Joe last weekend. I mean, there's probably 3 or 4 people that have a beard just because of medical reasons. So the point is this: is that we should do our best to accommodate. But at the end of the day, we have a mission, and we have to make sure the mission can be accomplished. So using the great technological advances that this country has and the creative thinkings, I think most, if not all, of these accommodations can be made without affecting the mission. However, again, those things have to be balanced, and we have to kind of look at each case. But really, there's, if you look at a lot of the gear that we wear nowadays in the hot sun, we're covering. We're covering to stay away from the heat. We're covering in many different ways. I don't think that we don't, as a nation, that we cannot find ways to accommodate different ethnic and religious groups and allow them to serve this country. And we should take that great source of integration away from these society, from these different groups, by saying, no, you can't do it because Sheiks can't do it because you have a beard, or this religion or a cap, things of that nature. I think it just leads to a diversity and leads to better understanding and better integration within the society. So I firmly believe that it's possible to be able to accomplish the mission and allow the religious accommodation, but we have to look at every case specifically.
Can I go 2 more really quick?
Can you do it afterwards, please?
Yeah, sure. That's fine. Sorry.
This is a really interesting question, sir, which I would ask on my opinion, personally too. So as a Muslim veteran, are you concerned about other Muslims who currently serve if Donald Trump is elected president? How would you encourage them as anti-Muslim attitude increases and intensifies?
OMG. I don't want to jump the gun. I'm sure that for most people, I think that we understand that this is a quite different election year than anything we've ever seen in the past. And because of that, there's a lot of jockeying for position, and people will tend to say things, whatever they think is going to be good to get the vote out for them. Is it going to be difficult? I think that just recently, Mr. Trump has come to the realization that some of the things that he's mentioned are illegal, unconstitutional. He can't do it alone by himself. There's a Congress, there's a Supreme Court, and so he's got to be a team player. As the CEO of however many countries or companies, he is the team. What he says goes. But the President of the United States has to be a team player. And I think that I don't think that some of the things that he's talked about will happen. What hurts me, though, is 2 things. We've given somebody like that a platform to speak, and 2, we have a following. He has a following of people. And that's sad, and in my opinion. But I don't fear for the Muslims. I mean, again, he wants to deport 11 million illegal aliens, and they said you have to do buses, 20-something buses every hour for 10 years, and the budget's not going to, so it's not going to happen.
Me personally, I have much greater faith in the American people. The systems of checks and balances in this country, the systems of law, and the fact of what I know of the American people is that I know that they'll make the appropriate choices, and the system of checks and balances will make sure that the rule of the law includes inalienable rights guaranteed to us by the Bill of Rights and the Constitution. Will be upheld.
So another interesting question. What are the most common misconceptions you have encountered in your life about your faith? And has there been any difference in what you've encountered inside and outside the military?
inside and outside.
The military.
So I guess the most common misconceptions is that a lot of people think that you're Arab if you're Muslim, and so I think that's a pretty big misconception. That it's actually a great minority of Muslims are of Arab origin, so they automatically assume that you must be Arab or you like Arab food or whatever it may be. That should be like the next thing to talk about, and so it's surprising to them often to know that Indonesia is the most populous Muslim nation, and the majority of the Muslims are from Southeast Asia. So when they kind of go through this and they realize that no, you're not from Saudi Arabia or wherever else, that's been a common. Many of them don't really understand kind of your background and where you're coming from, and your food and things of that nature. And really, it's just a matter of them not being exposed to it. So I think there's a lot of opportunity to educate. Now that I'm in the civilian world and only a reserve soldier, I would say that there's the perceptions in the military are not that different from the perceptions in general society at large. I think the soldiers are basically citizens that are coming in and taking an extra step, but pretty much like the rest of society in many aspects. So, I'm working scouting a lot right now, and, we go to district roundtables every month, and we went to the same thing as we started scouting about 5 years ago. And when we first started, they would always talk about Saudi, and how Saudi would have a unit, and it's okay, and eventually we had to get to know each other. We're American. I've been here since, for close to 40 years, and I don't have any connection with the Middle East. As far as ethnicity or background, and so is our scoutmaster is an Indonesian background, and so it took them a while. And now we've been working with the scouting organization for almost 5 years, and we get along very well, and a lot of the misconceptions have been broken and very well integrated in this district. But it took time. It took years of working together and inviting each other to meals and having lots of after-meeting conversations. We've now given presentations of each of these district roundtables. We go out to the churches. We've had hundreds of members of scouting come to our mosques and back and forth. Been lots of exchanges that's occurred over these last 5 years. And I'd say that's why it's also important for Muslims to serve in every aspect, including the military, because it's important for them to get to know you and experience this. When you deploy, it's a very unique environment. People have, you're gone for a year, you're in the middle of a desert, and pretty much just kind of stuck in this area and you're doing a mission. You don't really have a lot of the hustle bustle of life. You're usually at work, you're running to work, and you gotta go take care of your family. When you deploy, you go to work and then you just kind of sit around and talk, or you may, spend some time together because you don't have a family. Everyone around you becomes much closer to a family. So you get to have a lot more in-depth discussions about religion, about background, lifestyle, and so many other things that I didn't have an opportunity to do when I was in garrison. And with that, I found that my first deployment, by the time we came back, we had 6 new members of the Muslim faith coming back. And it wasn't from openly proselytizing. It wasn't from, hey, I want to tell you about Islam. It was like they wanted to know, hey, what is it about this? And many of them had been exposed to maybe their great-grandfather was Muslim, or maybe they'd been exposed to it because their brother was Muslim. So most of them had been exposed to Islam in some way, but now that they were away from the hustle bustle of there, they had some time to ask questions and reflect and read and look up things. And so I think that these deployments and kind of getting away, going to the field, really allow you to kind of break down all the barriers, because you're sleeping in the same room with 50 other people, and you really get to know each other pretty well. So I find that it's quite a nice opportunity, to be honest.
One misconception I'd like to add, when I joined the Corps of Cadets, I came from Pakistan, and a lot of students thought randomly I was the son of a king or something and thought I was slaves. And another one I felt was they all think every Muslim speaks Arabic. So it's actually not that. I speak Urdu, I don't even know how to learn it. I can understand it.
So the biggest misconception that I have found in talking to people once I accepted Islam was a lot of people in America think that all Muslims know their own religion. Because they think people pray, they must know something. Because they can recite Quran, they must know something. But these things don't necessarily, they don't equate. You know, the Pew Research Foundation on Religion did a study, and they can't poll everybody, but they extrapolated and they said, you know, about 50% of the world's Muslims don't pray the 5 daily prayers. And this is a command to do that. So doing some research and then actually being immersed with Muslims, right, and talking to them and finding out that all Muslims are not created equal. Some have a certain level of knowledge, some have less knowledge. And so therefore that leads me to my next statement. When people come to my class that I teach over in San Antonio, and they're interested in learning about Islam, and the piece of advice that I give them, I said, is don't get your Islam from a Muslim. Whatever you do, don't get your Islam from a Muslim, because we're all supposed to get our Islam from the same place. And it's the Quran, right? The scripture, and the sayings of the Prophet, right? And if people don't know that, that's where they need to get it from. And so that's the piece of advice that I give them, and that's the biggest misconception that I've seen, is that most people say, oh, because you pray, because you speak Arabic, or you say you're Muslim, you automatically know your religion. No, this is not true.
Last question. So, Dr. Mike, I know you were a non-Muslim when you were serving in the Air Force. How was your interaction with local Muslims when you were overseas, if there was any, and did it change your view on Muslims?
It's difficult because I was young, and we see things through a different lens when we're young than when we get older. And when we get older, we're more understanding, hopefully wiser, and more forgiving of certain things, understanding that people are people everywhere. And being in the military, I was fortunate enough, like I said, to be stationed in a lot of different countries and see how blessed we were. I'm not in the medical field, but I know I've been to places like the Philippines and seen severe malnutrition. And knowing that even if you could give food to that child that day, that child would still die. Okay? And so thinking, do we take so much for granted over here? Also, I had the opportunity to work at, used to be called BAMSI, now they call it SAMSI. And what Nadeem was talking about, I saw firsthand. I saw firsthand young men who had their whole life ahead of them. And they lost it. Because they didn't have arms rights. But you know what? One of the most redeeming things that I saw was a Marine recon troop who didn't have anything below his knees. But he was strong enough and wise enough to come to the mosque and ask us, tell me what Islam is really about. And I thought that was so wonderful. Because he knew that there's good in everybody. And some of the things that he may have seen may have been not what Islam was preaching. And so when he did that, it made my day.
Would you like to add anything to that, sir? Any other questions from audience? You have probably like 5-6 questions.
I only have two or something more.
Okay.
I'll promise I'll keep this kind of. Okay, so, sorry, let me get my thoughts in order here. Okay. So, you, both of you have mentioned cases where you specifically said Islam is made up of people. Therefore, Islam interpreted by different people is not always going to be the same thing, and it's not always going to be the purest form of Islam. So I had this conversation with Ahmed yesterday, that you want to talk about. Okay. And I asked him, so what, as a Muslim, how do you react to people in places such as Iran, or well, specifically Iran, the Ayatollah Khomeini? Every time he gets up in front of the crowd, the last thing that they say is "Death to America," and they're pumping their fists in the crowd. How do you react to that? How do you personally deal with that, and how do you communicate? How do you revitalize your perspective to mute out, to drown out the perspective of the enemy?
Again, we're not knowing, we don't know the people, we don't know the country, but we see these things going on. But we don't know things behind the scene, and the sister's going to raise her hand. But the thing is, sometimes when people do these things, when they act in a certain way, God has given us free will to make a choice, right? But sometimes the country that we're living in doesn't allow that choice. In other words, some of these countries where they're tyrants as rulers and despots, if the people don't go along with what they say, they're not gonna be around much longer. And so, just the other day, if you look at the news, Donald Trump asked people to raise their right hand and make a pledge, right? I don't know that they were going to vote for him no matter what. I don't know that, and they said that they would. The thing is we don't know about these people in these countries, okay? And so the thing that we need to do is not take what we see or what we hear as even related to Islam until we actually do our own research, until we learn for ourselves, until we get away from television and Dancing with the Stars, right? And we sit down and do the old-fashioned thing and open up a book, and do a little bit of research. Because, the countries that those people live in, a lot of people there are repressed.
I guess in the case of many different kind of snippets of news that we see, 2-second sound bites, I think that there's a lot more to behind these stories, and I rarely get too worked up about a 2-second sound bite. I realize that there's a lot more socioeconomic factors behind this, and it kind of causes me to want to read and understand what's causing them to kind of act in this way. And I think when you go and you kind of research and you understand it, you may start understanding why certain regions, countries, bad players, actors are acting this way. So to me, I don't get too worked up about the 2-second sound bites that often replayed for a political motive often. I often will just use it as an opportunity to try to understand exactly what's causing them, because we all know and love America. Why is it that they see it differently? And it may be what's being preached to them, or maybe the kind of slang that's being told to them. So I think it's important to understand those things before we judge to any conclusions saying that these are the evil people or these are the enemies. And just understand that there's a lot of other factors that's kind of going into this. A lot of these issues are very complicated. When we look at the different conflicts, whether it's in the Bosnian area, whether it's in Palestine, and things of that nature, and just how the political, socioeconomic relations have changed the different attitudes and the different wars have really made it very difficult for us to be able to take a soundbite and be able to make it that way. So I think it's important that we do our background learning, get to know people, and understand exactly what the grievances are. I really, a bit happy to see that America has reached out in the last year to Cuba and to Iran, and really turning these long-time enemies and starting to normalize some relationships so that people still get to know each other.
So you don't believe that Iran is an enemy?
I don't believe that Iran, as a nation, is our enemy. I believe that
can ask after the panel. You want to ask a question?
Well, it wasn't a question, but I wanted to add to the comments they had.
Okay, it is.
It's like, basically, our community is a political leader, and he might make any statements which is political in nature. It depends on what you search in Google, because if you search for Russia, Putin is also making bizarre statements against US. If you see Korea, or if you see Japan during the World Wars, they also made bizarre statements against US. So they're all political and suffer from Quran or Sunnah. That's all.
So she's saying that it's not part of our own religion, it's their own personal comments.
It's political statement, and the statement comes from different country, and they've got to do with the foreign policies of this country. It's not political.
That's a really good point. So we're gonna wrap up now. We have our.
I always like to note this when we're talking about this discussion is that as an African American, when you talk to someone who's white American, you ask them, do you think this slavery was justified, right? Or do you want to be blamed for slavery, right? And it's in relation to Muslims in a sense, right? Like, do you want to be blamed for another group of people's actions? It's completely unfair, right?
I'm not. Okay, I think y'all are misunderstanding my question.
No, I always like to note that for people, just so you can use it as like a platform of thinking, right? Like it's you can just add to just talk about it.
Anything else you'd like to add?
Any other questions?
Any other questions? If you have any other questions, you can come after the panel later on after we're done and ask them. We have an open house at April 9th. Please, all of you show up, invite your friends, family, fellow Aggies. It's a really friendly discussion. Thank you, Dr. Mike and Colonel Islam, for coming and giving an amazing discussion. Please give a big round of applause.